Tonight on 24, new U.S. pressures for the Islamic Republic to back down in negotiations.
It is the president of the entire administration has said, "We stand with the people of Iran. We stand with the right of peaceful protest."
The VP says a key U.S. demand is that Tehran stop executing protesters. The White House, on the eve of Netanyahu's trip to the U.S., has also said that if Iran doesn't make serious concessions, it will face serious consequences. Continued arrests of reformist figures in Iran, from Ali Shakuri Rad to Hussein Karoubi, coinciding with the judiciary chief's harsh attack on critics of the Islamic Republic's leader.
Look how many people they've killed.
And the continued revelation of new details about the killing of protesters in Iran, with the ongoing release of new videos. The images show numerous bodies of those killed in Quds City and Fard's Karaj.
From the Iran International, this is 24 with Fardad Farahzad.
Good evening to Iran International viewers around the world. Amid speculation about the timing of the next round of negotiations between the Islamic Republic and the US, the Jerusalem Post says Washington has sent a message to Tehran expecting it to come to the next round of talks with meaningful proposals. According to this report, the American side has told Iranian officials that the Trump administration expects the Islamic Republic to be ready for extensive concessions in the next meeting. Meanwhile, Mohammad Eslami, head of the Atomic Energy Organization, has said that the removal of enriched uranium from Iran was not on the agenda for negotiations, and the issue of diluting 60. At the same time, Benjamin Netanyahu, on the eve of his trip to the US, has emphasized that any negotiations with Tehran must include preventing the Islamic Republic from acquiring nuclear weapons, imposing restrictions on ballistic missiles, and ending the Iranian regime's support for its proxy forces. According to the Jerusalem Post, Netanyahu said in an Israeli security cabinet meeting that the Islamic Republic has repeatedly proven that its promises are not credible. My colleagues Mariam Rahmati from the UN and Marzia Husseini from the US Congress are with us. Mariam, I'll start with you. Tell us more about the reports that have been published regarding US pressure on Iran to make more concessions.
Fardad, after the first round of negotiations in Muscat and considering the statements we're hearing from both sides, it seems that a gap between the Islamic Republic of Iran and the US is still wide and significant. However, this doesn't mean that a path of diplomacy is completely closed. Currently, both sides are drawing lines in the sand for each other and setting red lines. For example, Donald Trump has warned the Islamic Republic that he expects Tehran's negotiating team to come to the next meeting, which hasn't been scheduled yet, with meaningful content. He has also warned that he expects the Islamic Republic of Iran to be ready in the next meeting to give extensive concessions to the US regarding nuclear issues and other matters. Trump doesn't want these negotiations to drag on, Fardad. He expects quick results, and for him, the outcome matters, not the process. This is something we're not currently seeing from the Islamic Republic, and even though Donald Trump has said that negotiations might resume this very week, Islamic Republic officials say it's unclear when the next session or meeting will be. Even on the framework, Fardad, there are extensive disagreements at this moment. At the same time, we heard that J.D. Vance, the U.S. Vice President, said an hour ago that whether the U.S. will agree to limited enrichment in Iran, or if any level of enrichment is a red line, that's actually a decision that U.S. President Donald Trump needs to comment on. We are now going to turn to a key portion of the remarks delivered earlier today by the United States Vice President J.D. Vance. He was speaking at a major policy conference where he addressed the administration's stance on current foreign affairs and domestic economic challenges. Let's listen in to an important part of that speech now.
I think it will be our president who will ultimately make the final decision. And if you look at the initial negotiations between us and the Iranians, President Trump was working very hard to reach a constructive agreement that would be good for America. But, well, the entire U.S. administration believed that if the Iranians had the necessary wisdom to reach an agreement, it would have been good for them too. Tonight, we're focused on U.S.-Armenia cooperation. But, well, I want the president himself to talk about where the red line will be in the negotiations. As you know, he usually has these conversations in private circles. He doesn't talk about it publicly. But, well, he's had good discussions with his team and with others. And in the coming days and weeks, I want the president himself to define these criteria for negotiating with Iran. With all due respect to the media, it's the president himself who is deliberately choosing not to show his cards publicly, keeping his true intentions and strategies closely guarded. The president has stated this very clearly in public, and this has been part of the negotiation so far. One of the president's very strong demands has been, first, that no prisoners be executed. Naturally, the crackdown was very violent. And as the president has said, we stand with the people of Iran. We support the right to peaceful protest around the world, and certainly the president has made this part of a conversation he's had not only with the Iranians, but with all governments in the region, and this will continue.
But Fardad, Tehran's positions show that the Islamic Republic is still not ready to cross its red lines and previous stances. This is something we also witnessed in past negotiations with the US, and even when they negotiated with European countries, they held the same positions and wouldn't back down from them. And this can be seen from the regime officials' repeated emphasis on continuing enrichment and conditioning any technical action on the complete lifting of sanctions. For example, Mohammed Islami, head of the Atomic Energy Organization, has said that any discussion about the removal or transfer of enriched uranium from Iran might not be accepted, and he also said that diluting 60% uranium is only negotiable if all sanctions are completely lifted. This particular development is something the United States doesn't seem willing to accept under any circumstances. It's entirely possible this could represent a critical red line for the administration, a point where Donald Trump might finally decide to use the military option against the Islamic Republic. In any case, we'll have to wait and see, once the next round of negotiations is officially set, whether the Islamic Republic will provide the United States with these specific concessions Donald Trump expects, or if these vital talks will simply hit another frustrating dead end, escalating tensions. Fardad.
Marzia, we know that tomorrow, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will head to the US to meet with the American president at the White House on Wednesday. They've said many times, both publicly and privately, that the nuclear issue isn't their only concern. According to the Israeli Prime Minister, Iran's missile program and its support for proxy groups must also definitely be included in any talks with Iran.
That's right. Mr. Benjamin Netanyahu is also going to be accompanied by Mr. Omer Tischler. He's slated to be Israel's future Air Force commander, and his presence is important because the Israelis currently don't have a military attaché in Washington. Consequently, the military dimension of this meeting is also very significant. We know Mr. Netanyahu was supposed to come to Washington, but he was scheduled for next week. He's moved his trip up very urgently, and before Mr. Netanyahu even arrives here in Washington to sit down at the White House, there have already been 2 emergency security cabinet meetings held in Israel. It's clear what the Israelis want. They have said it many times. But today, new reports are coming out. Israeli press, quoting Israeli officials, say that the Israelis are slowly starting to voice that even if a deal is reached between the US and the Islamic Republic, Israel will still, and if necessary, attack the Islamic Republic alone. Why? Unless Israel's share is also given from this negotiation table. And what is Israel's share? The Islamic Republic's missile program, which we know they aren't even willing to discuss. And what we're hearing from Tehran today, Mr. Islami's statements, Mr. Arakchi's statements, means that really the issue of this deal's file must somehow be closed. Mr. Arakchi emphasized, "We will not accept zero enrichment. We are ready to be attacked and to fight, but we won't do it." Mr. Arakchi's offer to reduce enrichment to 3 or 4% is essentially the same JCPOA deal Mr. Trump called the worst in history and is unwilling to sign after having already withdrawn from it. Or, for example, the statement made by Mr. Islami is that all sanctions must be lifted so that we can dilute that uranium. I remember during Mr. al-Shroub's trip to Washington, Mr. al-Shroub came here to Washington and went to kiss Mr. Trump's hand, if we want to refer to a contemporary model of complete sanctions relief. Even then, Americans here in Congress had doubts about completely lifting sanctions, even in a similar pattern to Syria. And now, the Islamic Republic is making such a request just for reducing enrichment to dilute the scope of, well, enriched uranium. The parties seem to misunderstand each other. Trump warns the Islamic Republic to come with a full hand, while Pezeshkian talks of a win-win deal, suggesting a long road to any agreement, if Israel allows.
Thank you to both of you, Marzia Hosseini at Congress and Marian Rahmati at headquarters. The United Nations in New York. The U.S. Maritime Administration, in a new advisory, has warned U.S.-flagged vessels to stay as far away as possible from Iranian waters when transiting the Strait of Hormuz. The advisory recommends that ships, when heading eastward, should navigate close to Omani waters and stay clear of Iranian waters without compromising navigational safety. This warning was issued after Iranian forces harassed a U.S.-flagged oil tanker in the Strait of Hormuz last week. Meanwhile, Mark Levin, a prominent Fox News host, wrote in a tweet about the possibility of a U.S. attack on the Islamic Republic, stating that the timing of an attack depends on U.S. military preparations and Israel's readiness. According to Levin, before an attack, it must be assessed how strong and robust the U.S. is, both offensively and defensively. He also emphasized that many Arab countries are trying to dissuade Trump, and those who favor the destruction of the Islamic Republic must show Trump that his decision has sufficient support. Admiral Robert Howard, former CENTCOM deputy and a distinguished commander of Naval Special Warfare Forces, and a key member of the Iran Policy Project at the JINSA think tank, is with us today. He is considered an influential strategist in Middle East security, artificial intelligence, and defense. Admiral, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. Now that negotiations are underway between the Islamic Republic and the U.S. in Oman, many are asking whether this U.S. military buildup in the region is, as they say, more of a gunboat diplomacy policy, or if, in your opinion, this posture is a gesture of readiness for a full-scale military attack.
I think they're preparing for everything. And they are clearly attempting to use this unique opportunity as a powerful tool to impose the very specific foreign policy and domestic reform measures they want the nation of Iran to adopt. Our goals are to permanently ensure that Iran never has the capability to develop or acquire nuclear weapons, to significantly reduce Iran's threatening strategic missile arsenal, to stop the brutal massacre of the Iranian people by their own government, and likewise to completely halt the financing of disruptive proxy forces throughout the region. So let me be clear that all of these options are actively on the table for discussion. At the same time, we have these ongoing military preparations, which involve deploying our forces and strengthening defensive positions, happening alongside the talks. Actually, I don't call them negotiations. I specifically call them dialogue.
Admiral, it seems there are multiple concerns about a full-scale confrontation with Iran, ranging from regional countries to Israel. But now, the U.S. government has issued a warning to U.S.-flagged ships regarding passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Since you yourself have a lot of experience in this area, I want to ask you, how much leeway does the Islamic Republic have to escalate tensions in the Strait of Hormuz? Because we know that, unlike, say, parts of the Sea of Oman or the Persian Gulf, these aren't international waters, they're transit waters, even though ships, even military ships, have the right of passage. This gives the Islamic Republic so much leeway to create a crisis there on the last day that would incur heavy costs for the U.S. and its allies.
I think this is truly the absolute last thing that could possibly benefit any party involved here, and that includes the Iranian regime itself. Of course, this isn't uncommon. We've seen in the past that the Iranian Navy, Iranian ships, have harassed and bothered others in that region for decades. And, well, now our Fifth Fleet has issued this warning for ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz to avoid Iranian waters and maintain maximum distance. And, well, the tools Iran has consistently used have been these gunboats, helicopters, and, well, we know they have the capability to even mine the waters, but if they were to do such a thing, realistically, that specific action would be formally considered an act of war, and then all of its ensuing consequences and widespread repercussions would most certainly prove to be profoundly significant.
The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln is currently in the Arabian Sea. It's not near the Persian Gulf. I want to ask you this. In the event of a confrontation, would there be operational capability from the Arabian Sea to cover all of Iran's territory? And in your opinion, would the aircraft carrier Abraham Lincoln and the other destroyers around it be safe from potential missile attacks by the Islamic Republic?
Well, allow me to make a couple of crucial points. Firstly, possessing an aircraft carrier battle group provides the capability to completely dominate an entire territory and its surrounding airspace. This is a significant strategic capability that Iran no longer has at its disposal. Secondly, it's understood that the United States and Israel have systematically degraded or destroyed all of their critical air defense capabilities, leaving them exceptionally weak in that regard. Therefore, the conclusion is clear. Yes, with comprehensive missile attacks, it is entirely possible to strike across all of Iran's territory and effectively target the regime's strategic objectives and its core components of power. So Iran is actually defenseless at this point, minus this capability to, create some disruption and harassment using their missiles. But if they were to use those missiles, counterattacks would neutralize them very quickly.
During the 12-day war with Israel, the Islamic Republic actually attacked Al Udeid Air Base in Qatar, although most of the missiles were destroyed in the air. One of them hit the base itself and destroyed a communication structure. Now, that was on land. How serious is this concern at sea? In your opinion, can the defensive systems of carriers like the Abraham Lincoln stop the Islamic Republic's missiles?
Without a doubt, and more importantly than the specific attack on Qatar, this incident highlights just how remarkably poor the Iranians' targeting capability is. We must remember, these were not challenging mobile objectives. They were completely fixed, stationary targets on land that have been known for years, making the failure even more significant. But if you want to hit a moving target that's constantly shifting its position at sea, that would be a much bigger challenge for the Iranian regime. So again, I think the targeting of those objectives they hit in Qatar was, at best, ineffective and inefficient. Now, you're talking about the U.S. Navy, which not only has defensive systems, but can also detect these missiles in the air, respond to them, and defend themselves. And then they also have immediate offensive capabilities to strike the point from which those attacks originated. So this would actually be the end of the regime, even faster than the Iranian people could overthrow this regime. So this would be a dangerous game for the regime.
Admiral, this question I'm asking might have more of a political aspect than a military one, but since you yourself mentioned the fall of the regime, I want to ask this. Many are comparing the current tension with the tension with Venezuela. Venezuela, however, didn't have hostility with its neighboring countries, at least not in the way the Islamic Republic does. It seems to have more limited capabilities, and there was, after all, a relatively technocratic government whose remnants were willing to work with the US. Regarding the Islamic Republic, there's no such indication. If it truly comes down to direct military intervention, in your opinion, could the Islamic Republic be successfully overthrown without deploying ground troops, relying solely on a sustained campaign of drones, missiles, and cruise missiles?
Well, I believe that overthrowing the regime must ultimately happen from within the country, but with our dedicated moral and diplomatic support for the Iranian people themselves. Can our military attacks be part of this process? Perhaps yes, but for lasting peace to be established, this overthrow must happen internally. So comparing Iran and Venezuela is completely inappropriate, because Iran is a country of 90 million people. These are Persian people. This is a society that has existed there for 25 centuries. So it's a completely different picture. And in this case, when you have a regime where more Iranian citizens have been killed than those killed in the two wars in Iran and Afghanistan during those 15 years that those wars lasted. So this is something the Iranian people no longer accept. And we've now reached a point where even merchants bazaar traders, ordinary people, and even parts of the government. I believe those serving in the Iranian army can no longer tolerate a government willing to massacre its own people on such a scale. That's why the change of this regime is inevitable, and the countdown for it has begun. And the Iranian people are naturally very eager for support to achieve this change and hold this regime accountable.
On paper, your point seems perfectly logical, but has there been a historical precedent where, for example, the United States launched air attacks from the sky and then protesters on the ground overthrew a government?
Well, for the sake of providing a more complete picture, we need to mention a couple of different points. Again, I have to say that we've lived under the shadow of Iraq's legacy for years now, and, well, something that became a strategic problem for us was that we completely purged the Iraqi army. We could have kept the Iraqi army intact, and if you look at Iran in 1979, when the revolution happened, it was the imperial army that actually became the decisive factor, and sided with the people instead of massacring them, and actually took a stance against the Shah. We could witness such a situation again, meaning a number of army members, maybe even some IRGC members, or lower-level Basij members who don't have very strong ideological motivations and care about their families and friends, might decide they don't want to massacre their fellow citizens. This could become a turning point.
Thank you, Admiral Robert Howard, former Deputy Commander of CENTCOM, a distinguished commander of Naval Special Forces, and a key member of the Iran Policy Project at the Gensa think tank. Thank you. You are watching Iran International and the program 24. In the new wave of arrests of political activists in Iran, Hossein Karoubi, son of Mehdi Karoubi, along with a number of reformist figures including Ali Shakurirad, Mohsen Aminzadeh, Ibrahim Askarzadeh, and Azad Mansouri have been arrested and summoned. Fars news agency, affiliated with the IRGC, has described Hossein Karoubi as the instigator of the publication of Mehdi Karoubi's structure-breaking statement and as being connected with subversive elements. Simultaneously, the head of the Islamic Republic's judiciary has attacked those who, according to him, serve and mercenary for America and Israel, and criticized the leadership of the Islamic Republic. Iraj Mistanghi, political analyst from Stockholm, and Reza Alijani, political analyst and activist from Paris, have joined us. Thank you both. Mr. Mistanghi, I'll start with you. Various theories have now been put forward for this wave of arrests of reformists. One of them is that perhaps the Islamic Republic has reached a point where it's concerned that if things get out of control, something perhaps similar to a quasi-coup might occur from the reformists. The experience of Venezuela might also be a concern for the government. Do you buy into this, or do you have another theory?
Greetings to you, and also to Mr. Alijani, and our dear viewers and recited listeners. Look, I think this shows that the Islamic regime has absolutely no capacity for change. This shows that Khamenei has saddled his horse for repression, for slaughter. The day before, he said Americans had plotted something, and we dealt with it. And he said, if such a thing happens again, we will deal with it. All those who, in these very days after the bloody crackdown, claimed that Israeli and American agents were among the protesters and somehow called them terrorists. Today, Khamenei's blade has fallen on their own necks, and this, in my opinion, has been tested many, many times. The point is that, in fact, Khamenei is afraid that a model like what happened in Venezuela might occur, even though these people aren't in power and are currently alongside the government and have always been supporters of the government. And they claimed that after the 12-day war, the regime would be forced to give in to them, would have to come to them, and they were celebrating that we will form the next government. But, well, we see that this isn't happening, and we see how they end up in prison. Of course, I predicted this before and emphasized that they would end up in prison, contrary to their predictions. However, the point here is that, look, Khamenei fundamentally doesn't have such capacity, and Iran is different from Venezuela. Look, in Venezuela's current political climate, you simply do not see a single public demonstration offering support for any opposition political figures or even prominent human rights activists. But in Iran, we see people coming to the streets under a hail of gunfire, under widespread slaughter, chanting, loudly chanting, Pahlavi is the national slogan, and making piles of the dead. In any case, the Islamic regime can do anything, or Khamenei can, or America can, or with each other's help, or with the help of a part of the regime. But the people of Iran, I promise you this, there is no fear. The people of Iran will continue on their path. It is the people of Iran who are the determinants, and the people of Iran will write the end of this scenario, not any foreign power.
Mr. Alijani, let me ask you this too. In your opinion, what is the reason for these arrests, even though it seems the reformists, meaning if we consider Mohammad Khatami as their leader, have fully stood behind the government after the nationwide protests? Now, there have been criticisms, including from these figures who were mentioned. What, in your opinion, is the reason for these arrests?
Warmest greetings to you, dear Miss Daggy, and to all the wonderful viewers joining us today. Look, ironically, the reason for their arrest is that this time they didn't stand behind Khatami, meaning they weren't aligned with Khatami's stance. The statements they issued, what Shakuri Rad said, and Azar Mansouri's stance, ironically provoked a government response. Now, if I want to give the general reason, one reason is intimidation. It wants to scare everyone, scare all political forces, so there's no breathing room. After this massacre, after this brutal killing, it wants there to be no breathing room, neither in the squares nor in the streets. They are arresting so many young people, unknown individuals who, well, don't have names, but are now under pressure in detention centers. They raid homes in the morning, in the middle of the night, at their workplaces, and arrest them. It is a duty of political forces to also focus on these people. But now, these are more famous names. Look, they want the field to be empty, the domestic political scene to be empty, meaning one of the security officials had said, "We won't let any alternative form inside the country." The same 17 people, well, 4 or 5 of them have been arrested by now, and also they don't want any alternative within the system itself. If these people had taken positions similar to Hassan Khomeini and Khatami, I don't think they would have been arrested. So the reason for their arrest is, first, general intimidation that's being applied equally to everyone, and second, the stance they've taken, and they essentially want to silence this voice. This voice, whether it's the reformists who have softer positions or Mir Hossein Mousavi who has a tougher stance. These people, well, naturally, they don't have their previous social base. But you know, the political scene isn't all or nothing. They do have their own specific social body. They have a voting network that was active even in this last election, and they have a voting network that at times has moved beyond them but still maintains connections. And they also have a certain degree of influence on the country's important military and clerical bodies. And the Venezuelan model, I also agree with Mr. Mistavi, has absolutely no resemblance to Iran. But the Islamic Republic, in its delusions, fears this too. At one point, they were afraid of Hashimi. I remember in 79 and 80, when we were in Sepah prison 59, the interrogator used to say, "Engineer Abi is the European Union's candidate for Iran's future, and we will blackball him." Now, at one time, they thought they were sidelining Hashimi. Even Hassan Rouhani was at risk. Now they think these people are a threat, and somewhat on the sidelines, because a large portion of them voted for Pezeshkian. They're afraid, this is a footnote by the way, that these people will also put pressure on Pezeshkian, and that the internal conflict within the system will intensify, and we've seen it ourselves.
Mr. Alijani, excuse me for interrupting you, but since you mentioned Pezeshkian, I actually have an interesting clip I'd like to play, if you allow it. It's related to a part of Ibrahim Askarzadeh's previous statements. Regarding the necessity of electing Masoud Pezeshkian, he had said during the presidential election campaign in June 2024, in an interview with BBC Persian, that Pezeshkian is someone who would resign if a bullet or a pellet is fired into the eye of an Iranian youth. I want us to watch that part together.
My perception is that Mr. Pezeshkian would resign if a bullet or pellet is fired into the eye of a young Iranian on the streets of Tehran.
You see, Mr. Alijani, not only did Pezeshkian not resign, he's still standing behind the leader and defending him. I understand that some of these remaining reformist figures are saying such things now. But in your opinion, have their cards really not been burned among the supporters they once had?
Yes, I said it's not all or nothing. Look, if we go back, this delusion, a large part of our intellectual society had it. Even Khomeini himself, a delusion, and doctors had these, and they need to get out of these delusions, and to some extent, I think they have. The things Shakurirad said, like Pezeshkian, why did you believe the security reports? With your words, you've set the nation's heart on fire. This is what Mr. Shakurirad says, who was one of Pezeshkian's campaign officials. But look, there's also a more general issue. I think there's a more fundamental discussion. It's about the project and approach we have for Iran's future. This project, in my opinion, global experiences have also shown that we must proceed, especially against such a savage government and religious tyranny that thinks God's hand is on its trigger. We must be able to mobilize and align the maximum force. My logic is better late than never. My logic is this, not that they should be brought to the front of the line, but they should be in the line with this view, and experience has also shown that such governments must be loosened from within, and from the outside, society must be able to overcome them in the streets. Therefore, however much force they have now regarding its extent, we might not have exactly the same opinions, for example. But anyway, regarding this particular project, and based on the example I previously gave, it's not an all or nothing scenario. We should be open to and wholeheartedly welcome these valuable alternative positions. While we have our ideological criticisms, we also have our historical criticisms, whether towards Mr. Mousavi, these individuals, or other forces. Therefore, this specific project holds the potential to create genuine social mobilization. Consequently, I believe the opposition's policy, logic, and public discourse should be fundamentally oriented toward consensus building. It is precisely with this achieved consensus that hope is generated internally among the people. Furthermore, this unity ensures that foreign observers will not perceive an opposition where factions are constantly fighting, making them conclude that it is simply impossible to constructively engage with any of them.
Mr. Mistaghi, this better late than never approach, in your opinion, can it truly be said by the opposition to this late arrival, especially if things reach a point where a technocratic event must happen at the last minute for power transfer? After all, these are people who have worked within this system. They know where this department is, where that department is, who holds the key to what. Do you think that especially these types who are openly opposing the Islamic Republic system and its leader, despite their background, can play a role in the transition?
Look, anyone, I've said this before, I've emphasized it myself many times. Prince Reza Pahlavi has also pointed out that anyone can leave the regime's camp and join the people, those who haven't been involved in massacres, those who haven't been involved in murder and crime. So whoever came, even if they came late, they're welcome. This is one issue. But the other issue is, fundamentally, those who want to come, or those who are supposed to come, or those who want to lead, do they want to become standard bearers? Do they want to stand against the national will? Do they want to stand against Prince Reza Pahlavi's option, which is the option of the Iranian nation, the option of the majority of the Iranian nation, the vast majority of the Iranian nation, or not? Do they want to play their own tune? Do they want to continue their animosity towards him or his program until the very end? Look, sir, so there is absolutely no misunderstanding. I am telling you directly. I'm telling Mr. Alijani, and I am also telling all of our viewers watching this right now. Look, just today, Mr. Asgharzadeh was arrested at a time when he was participating in the Congress of the Fedayeen Khalq. Fedayeen Khalq and he are ready to go together. Fedayeen Khalq don't care at all that he was involved in massacres, involved in crimes, involved in suppression, involved in purging universities, that they killed their comrades, their comrades. They're ready to go with these people. Look, even now, Mr. Alijani can easily go with Mir Hossein Mousavi. Mr. Alijani was also in prison during the 1988 massacre and knows Mir Hossein Mousavi was involved in the crime and massacre of 1988. Intelligence ministers massacre role. They're ready to go with them. They're ready to go with those who were involved in murder and massacres. But when it comes to Prince Reza Pahlavi, all these objections start. The point is, I don't see any problem. Anyone can come. Or rather, we should pave this way so that people know they shouldn't stay and commit massacres until the 90th minute. and they should know they can leave the regime's camp. This opportunity must exist, and I emphasize it. However, the critical questions are where this will happen, in what form, and in what manner. Most importantly, will they finally choose to stand with the Iranian nation or remain against them?
Mr. Mustavi, these people, well, a part of them are ideological, and naturally, in the aftermath of a potentially free Iran, there will be a power struggle. And I guess for many of them, perhaps there's this concern that if we fully back Prince Reza Pahlavi, then we won't have any cards left to play in a free Iran. How do you think this can be addressed? Because it's clear that, well, many of them, for example, the meeting he had, as you mentioned, it's clear that ideologically there's a big gap. This doesn't mean they necessarily prefer the Islamic Republic over Prince Reza Pahlavi, but going under his umbrella, I can guess, is hard for many of them to stomach.
Well, look, this is the group that created the catastrophe of 57. They created the misery of 57. And incidentally, it's a catastrophe that all of us participated in. But these people are still trying to continue down the same path. And that's why the Allied forces are too. Fundamentally, political Islam, in my opinion, in a way sees its continuation in the Islamic system. You won't see a single marja-e-taqlid who has criticized it even slightly. Why? Even those who are in Najaf, they're not under the blade of suppression, but they have their financial dealings. And incidentally, these are the very people who used to say, I don't know, if an anklet is taken from a Jewish woman's foot and a Muslim hears about it and dies, there's no blame on him. You see that these people killed tens of thousands, wounded hundreds of thousands, and no one spoke up. No marja-e-taqlid. This represents the profound ideological failure not only of Shiism, but of political Islam as a whole, revealing that everything they initially promised to the people was fundamentally a lie. This deception is perfectly exemplified, just as you, in my opinion, very appropriately and correctly highlighted, with Mr. Oscar Zada's promise. That same historical promise is now being cynically repurposed to convince the Iranian nation to support a deeply problematic and criminal figure like Mr. Pezeshkian. And you saw what role he plays in suppression. You saw how he walked in front of the suppressors with his arms crossed, and you saw he was in the front row, and these people are criminals. These people have Iranian blood on their hands. Won't be forgotten.
Yes, excuse my interruption, Mr. Mustagi, but I must say this is a key and important point. Mr. Alijani, this is a key point that, well, many Iranians are also referring to on social media, and we see that, well, many reformist figures, or reformists who have even become regime changers now, seem to look at figures like Mir Hossein Mousavi and Mohammad Khatami with a great deal of leniency, and they're willing to overlook and forgive or turn a blind eye to some of those past crimes, and say, well, we're looking to the future. But then when it comes to a figure like Prince Reza Pahlavi, they're very concerned about him and his associates, saying, oh, someone said such and such. Maybe it's a sign of fascism, for example. How is it that one side, whose hands are truly stained with blood, and there are documents to prove it, is looked at with so much leniency, while the other side of the opposition, who says, I also believe in the ballot box, is viewed with so much skepticism?
Look, incidentally, let me answer Mr. Mustabi. For that very reason, of course, I'm not backing Mousavi. Mr. Mousavi must be held accountable for the issues of 67. But Mr. Mousavi has stood by his words for 15 years in a free environment and has reached a point of transition. I say welcome to Mr. Mousavi for the very reason that Mr. Mustadi is also standing in a line with someone who was a brutal Sabak agent, a close friend of Mr. Khamenei. These people joining the monarchist camp, you can't even cleanse them with a whole river of water. I mean, this is a double standard. But I also believe that Mr. X and Y, who came from that side to join Mr. Pahlavi's ranks, whether you take his artists, his athletes, or others, I don't want to name names now, they are forgiven, which I think fundamentally both crime and plunder are not subject to the statute of limitations, neither in the former regime nor in the current regime. But there's a culture, a project. You see, in Chile, they went and negotiated with Pinochet, who wanted to massacre people in a stadium, and they achieved something. They don't even need to join the movement. I welcome it too. I've always said these things. My theories are not the same as those who have this protective stance towards Mr. Pahlavi. My positions are also clear. Consider how whites and blacks in South Africa eventually came together to overcome their differences, you see? If we continue to use this kind of divisive rhetoric, it will only serve to scare potential allies away. It's not just a few yeses now. Every single person with blood on their hands must be held accountable. But this doesn't justify, for example, you coming and, so to speak, raising the flag of Savak's brutal agents and Savak's own flag. And this culture isn't just the culture of 2 or 3 people. You see, it's reached a point where they go into restaurants and say, you must put up the prince's picture right now and, so to speak, approve it. These people with, in fact, everyone, Narges.
Mr. Alijani, look, the example you gave, it's a good example. A citizen who has also been criticized a lot went to a restaurant and told someone, why haven't you put out the lion and sun flag? Your criticism is valid. But how can one see this criticism but then Mir Hossein Mousavi, who is still pursuing Khomeini's golden days, and his hands are stained with blood, and with him?
I'm answering that point. Look, Mir Hossein Mousavi wasn't in the security system to the extent that Mr. Sabati was. Look, the discussion isn't just about someone who was concerned with restaurants. According to Mr. Mistaghi, Narges Mohammadi was not part of the disaster of 57. Individuals like Narges Mohammadi, Tumar Salahi are just a few examples of the many poets, writers, and political activists, meaning death to all except us. Death to all except us. Now, Mr. Mistaghi has found himself in a certain camp. I say to Mr. Mistaghi's face, he's greater than this. Mr. Mistaghi's stature is such that he has experienced 30 Khordad, he has seen 67, he has seen Furuq Jabidan, he has analysis on it. His stature is not just to be a speaker at the ceremonies of these friends he has recently joined. Those who moved past death to the 3 corrupt ones and reached death to Tahiri and Takizadeh and, I don't know, Kalashi, they have reached death to all except us. Sir, I consider Mr. Mistaghi's experience and knowledge, who truly did a masterpiece in Hamid Nouri's trial, to be greater than this. Now, Mr. Pahlavi no longer listens to Shahryar Ahi and Khansari. Mr. Mistaghi and others who have more experience really should advise. I mean, this culture and this rhetoric are destructive. Now, Mir Hossein Mousavi, his hands were in blood, but Narges Mohammadi wasn't, You see this in your culture, on the streets, day by day. I see these security channels producing videos of the opposition fighting among themselves, of threats to the future of people within this system, or anyone who is involved in 57, or the insults made against religion, God, and the Prophet. They take this and show it to their ranks. They show it to the military. They show it to the clerics. And they say, look, if we leave, these people will come.
You've brought up many points, but with only a minute and a half left in the program, I want to give this time to Mr. Mistaghi.
Please go ahead. Look, it's really interesting. He's basically whitewashed Mousavi and compared him to Mr. Sabati. To me, even a single rotten hair of Mr. Sabati is worth more than Mir Hossein Mousavi. Let me tell you, as someone who has researched and knows him well, Mir Hossein Mousavi is the one who had the Prime Minister's intelligence under his supervision and played the biggest role in suppression, killings, and crimes. Mir Hossein Mousavi is someone whose minister, if, Mr. Sabati was in charge of the 3rd General Directorate of Savak, well, Mr. Mir Hossein Mousavi's minister directly killed 4,000 people in the 67 massacre. As someone who has researched this, look, my central point is this. I have spent years building actual credibility, and I have significant backing from influential people. This isn't just talk. I don't want to take out hard-won social capital and simply put it in the bank to use for that. My primary objective is to utilize this for the advancement and prosperity of the Iranian nation. In this role, I am someone who genuinely tries to be the authentic voice that represents the hopes and aspirations of the Iranian people. I am not someone who still hangs Khomeini's picture above his head today. While Mir Hossein Mousavi is nostalgically looking for the Imam's supposed golden era, my own goal is looking for Iran's complete liberation. That's our fundamental difference, and frankly, I'm sorry that you choose to stand with people who have their hands up to their elbows in the blood of innocence. If Prince Reza Pahlavi had even a drop of that blood on his hands, I wouldn't have stood next to him for a single minute as a matter of principle. Yet it appears you are perfectly willing to stand shoulder to shoulder with these violent criminals, but you categorically refuse to stand with him.
I wish this heated discussion could continue. Thank you to Iraj Mistaghi in Stockholm and Reza Alijani in Paris for being with us. Thank you for being a viewer of 24 tonight.